Thank you, Clive, and I know that everyone here supports improvements to tackle homelessness, and from a Conservative perspective, we welcome efforts to do just that, in particular in helping people to avoid becoming homeless in the first instance. Thus, it is in this regard that we support the general principles of this bill. However, I will say that having consulted with numerous stakeholders, it is clear that this legislation is not a silver bullet. The scale of the homelessness crisis in Wales, compounded by the dire state of housing provision, the conflicting Welsh Government policies on housing and the environment, and the fact that the rate of house building is at one of its lowest ever levels, has led many to believe that the bill's impact will be limited. We must also recognise that homelessness is often rooted in complex personal circumstances, relationship breakdowns, addiction, PTSD, family conflict, transitions from care or prison, domestic abuse, and housing individuals with such vulnerabilities and complex needs is far from straightforward. While we can and should provide robust support services, we're going to be faced with persistent challenges, and this may explain why, despite increased efforts by local authorities, the rates of homelessness prevention and relief have remained static since the Housing Act 2014. Therefore, in its best form, I believe that this bill will not end homelessness, but rather help improve the speed and accessibility of accommodation for those at risk or are already homeless. And the Cabinet Secretary has stated that the bill will expand access to homelessness services and enhance support for those most in need. I've spoken directly with frontline staff in homeless services and temporary accommodation, and they face significant challenges, constant threats of violence and inadequate pay that fails to reflect the stress and pressures of their roles. If this bill is to succeed, it must be accompanied by substantial support for those working in the sector, not just financial, but also in terms of health and well-being. We also need long-term funding for services supporting people affected by addiction and violence. A recurring concern is the short-term nature of funding cycles, which leads to high staff turnover and undermines service consistency. This is not to say that we shouldn't try, but we must be realistic. The bill is not a quick fix solution, and many pressing issues lie beyond its scope. A major concern raised by stakeholders is the lack of available housing. The private rental market is contracting in many parts of Wales, and there's simply not enough homes to meet demand. The proposal to remove the priority register and intentionality tests is contentious. While I admit that most people currently presenting as homeless do meet priority criteria, shifting to a first-come, first-served model in an already overstretched system risks exacerbating the problem and increasing pressure on services. From a technical standpoint, the bill requires significant amendment. For example, the bill on registered social landlords to accept housing referrals from local authorities must be balanced with a reciprocal duty on local authorities to provide relevant information about tenants' housing and support needs. This will help RSLs make informed decisions that benefit both individuals and communities, ensuring sustainable tenancies. Without this information, there are real risks to safeguarding and community cohesion. Additionally, the bill mandates that RSLs and private providers allocate properties for a common housing register maintained by local authorities. If implemented, it is essential that this register captures only social housing, not market or student housing, and allows for necessary transfers outside the register. We welcome the continued exemption from referral for applicants at risk of abuse if returned to their area of local connection, and the broader definition of abuse to include domestic and other forms, both vital protections for vulnerable individuals. However, we're disappointed that the bill does not exempt military veterans and their families in Wales from the local connection test. While we acknowledge the Cabinet Secretary's pledge to introduce secondary legislation to address this, we are concerned about this commitment beyond the current parliamentary term, especially given the implementation timeline extended into the next Senedd. It is therefore our group's firm position that an exemption for veterans should be incorporated. Finally, I must express disappointment that the Welsh Government did not consult on the draft bill, choosing to instead consult only on the white paper. The absence of input from the housing sector during drafting has created a sense that the bill is being rushed, which risks unforeseen consequences. In conclusion, while we support the bill's general principles, we must be clear about its limitations. ending homelessness in Wales will require far more. We need to increase the supply of affordable housing, substantially free up the market to build more homes, and resolving policy conflicts that currently hinder progress. Without addressing these broader issues, the aims of this bill will remain out of reach. Thank you.